1. Intros rolling. All right, you ready, Martin?
Hello and welcome to the show. I'm Martin Willis, your host, and we have a great show for you this evening. We have JAN HARZAN from Mufon. He's the executive director for Mufon. He'll be coming up. First, we have Alejandro Rojas with UFO updates. And speaking of updates, I'm going to tell you the next, I thought it was going to be 2 weeks, but it's actually 3 Tuesdays. I'm going to be traveling. And the first Tuesday next week, we have Jeremy Ray on from, you might know him from Hangar One. He's going to be on. That's a pre-recorded show on that one. The week after is going to be Grant Cameron. That is going to be live on YouTube, but it's going to be a pre-recorded show on KGRA Radio, which we are on. So that also is going to be a pre-recorded show because I just don't want to do it in the middle of the night, to be honest with you. Then on the week after that, I'm actually going to be in Vienna. I'm going to be doing a show live from there. It's going to be earlier in the day as well, but with a avid listener. He's trying to get some things together with some other people. So that should be interesting. That's 3 weeks out. So for right now, I want to thank everyone that supports the show. Anyone can do that. That information's on podcastufo.com. We also have a very active Facebook page, which is updated every day if anyone wants to check that out. That's under Podcast UFO. I believe it says Podcast UFO live shows on Facebook. And that is enough chit-chat for now. Alejandro, how are you doing?
Hello.
Mr. Spaceman.
Good. I am so jealous of you getting to visit Vienna. I was in Budapest, as you know, like last year, and I heard that Vienna's like a more updated kind of beautiful version of Budapest. Although Budapest is kind of fun because it's old and lots of young people. But
I'd love to see Budapest. Yeah,
I'd love to see Vienna. We'll have to compare notes when you get back.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it should be a lot of fun. So, what is going on in the UFO world?
What's going on in the UFO world? Well, you've got Jan on today, and this is a bit of a bittersweet because Mufon was mentioned in the New York Times today. I'm not sure maybe if Jan's seen this article yet, and they talked about the symposium, but unfortunately, the symposium's already happened. So it was like, oh man, they got that plug for the symposium in late. But this story, interesting. So New York Times, you know, they released that story in December. Big news about Luis Elizondo, who was at the MUFON symposium, and everything going on there with that program. And since then, they've done some follow-up stories, one with Steve Justice and some others, covering some very credible aspects of the UFO phenomenon. Today's story was a little different. This one was covering a gentleman named Robert Bingham. Have you heard of him?
No, Robert Bingham?
Yeah. He's been at the conference, and I believe he's in the LA area. Jan might recognize him, especially when I mention what he does. Essentially, he believes he can call in UFOs, and often he'll be in the parking lot at UFO conferences, standing there looking at the sky, telling people, hey, I'm calling in UFOs. And then sometimes people will say, oh my gosh, I saw a UFO with him. Although personally, every time I've asked, what did it look like? It sounds like a balloon. I mean, it's usually just a small little thing floating across the sky, very high up in the air. So nothing too spectacular that I've heard of. But he certainly gathered a pretty big following. If you went and looked at your emails, I'm sure you would find some emails from some of his kind of followers or the group of people that follow him. They've created this YouTube page where they all hang out. And I've watched some of these videos because these people have contacted me and said, oh my gosh, we got something really cool. But, I haven't even sent any of these videos to Mark D'Antonio, because none of them even look. To me, I haven't seen anything that looks that spectacular yet. Who knows? I mean, who knows what's going on with the nature of whatever may be out there? I'm not saying it's not possible, but at least I haven't seen anything that really shocking from this group as of yet. But I think the most shocking thing I've seen of this group is that they have an article dedicated to them in the New York Times today. So that's really interesting.
Wow. I noticed the New York Times is publishing some, more UFO stories, which is, I don't know if previously they did too much with that. I know they showed an article from 1952 when they published something. But
yeah, not a whole lot. And often what they would do would be tongue-in-cheek type of stuff. So certainly this year has been great for New York Times articles, coming out with very credible information. A lot of people, like our listeners who are really into the credible type of stuff, may cringe at stories like we see today. But I think what's important, and I know this is something, Jan struggles with daily, is that, this whole phenomenon has created kind of a culture. So it's a cultural thing as well. And how people react to these different possibilities is another aspect of this whole phenomenon. In fact, Jacques Vallée used to speak to it, and he used to argue that if the government doesn't really share with us what's going on, then people will be left to speculate, and that just perpetuates this culture of people creating these cults or different kind of groups around this speculation. And he argued that's one of the reasons that the government should be leading kind of research and giving the public something to hold on to, something to grasp when it comes to this topic. But Jacques' arguments, unfortunately, have fallen on deaf ears thus far. But, I think he's 100% right that when you don't have anything official really coming out, then you just have a lot of people, it leaves a lot of room for speculation. And I would note that, we kind of talked about this a bit last time when we talked about this new project to examine artifacts or material from UFOs that the To the Stars group has started up. But there's really no, even when it came to Elizondo's group, there was no public interface piece to that at all. Even now, we just have Elizondo sharing with us and then leaked documents that people like George Knapp have been able to obtain or the New York Times have been able to obtain. But there hasn't been any sort of public aspect to that program. So we'll see what happens in the future. In fact, we're still kind of in this limbo where the Department of Defense hasn't even really they've acknowledged the existence of the program, or at least the funding for the program, but they haven't spoken to it beyond that, nor have they released any official documents. In fact, they've even denied at one point that the videos were really from the DOD, which I believe they are. So, yeah, the public interaction, has been the difficult part when it comes to all of this. And
along the lines of your point there, pardon me for the interruption, is that...
No problem.
I've had people on the show that say, what a wonderful thing if the government does not want, the word out there, how people go, real fringe on the topic and muddy the water. And so no one knows what to believe. And that's a gift, if the government is truly trying to hide, things, or they're trying to... just keep it as secret as possible.
Yeah,
if they
that
know
would
anything.
Be true.
Yeah,
that would be a method that could be used, and I think would make a lot of sense. I think certainly Nick Pope has spoke to that when he talked to the UK and how they dealt with things that really they didn't really have to do much because the public did the work for them. They muddied the waters and speculated enough where it wasn't taken seriously enough, and even though the UK would make fun of the topic in order to kind of throw people off the scent, that that sort of thing just helped them. But it's also, I think, at least for me over the years, as researchers, you just kind of make a peace with this is just how people in the public deal with things differently, and we need to just embrace that, not get too frustrated with it, and then try to, move on professionally and try to, like what we attempt to do, provide information, the best information possible.
Now, you want to tell we have about 4 minutes left here, so you want to tell the listeners what you're planning on doing, your YouTube, your show on Thursday and all that?
So I have a new YouTube Live, kind of like this, right? We're on YouTube Live, show that I'm doing on Thursdays at 6 p.m. Arizona time, which is currently aligned with Pacific because Arizona doesn't change time. So 6 p.m. on our Open Minds YouTube page, you'll be able to see me live. Kind of talking about the news for the week, what Open Minds is up to for the week, what I've been writing about for the week. And it's called UFO Seriously because, now we're in, I think, this new world where people are taking the topic more seriously. I want to kind of be a place where I'm providing more serious, credible information. And not to say that I'm saying anybody else is wrong. I just want a place where people who, maybe are more conservative with how they obtain their information, to be able to have information that is more credible. And it's also covering topics that are serious, that are related. So astrobiology, space flight, all of these sort of things. One of the things I talked about was the Space Force. What's with this new Space Force? Is it really going to be for searching for aliens? And like I wrote in this article, it's more about a conversation that's been ongoing for decades, and how do we protect our satellites from the Chinese and Russians who are developing killer satellite weapons. I'm sure we are too. And just kind of getting into spending the dollars and prioritizing enough in this arena. It's a conversation that's been going on a long time. So it's not something necessarily that the president pulled out of nowhere, although his sticking to this term Space Force is kind of lends itself to more ridicule, whereas it's really U.S. Air Force Space Command, which we already have a department for this, but pulling it out of the Air Force and calling it just a U.S. Space Command, like Pence talked about, and having this kind of sixth branch of the government that's in charge of this. So that's the history behind it. It's not necessarily something new, although people felt, since the Pentagon had just announced something in December, that the timing was coincidental. But Luis Elizondo, I think he shared this in MUFON, and I certainly have shared with me in private conversation and with others like on Coast to Coast. He does not feel, that the government has taken this topic seriously enough. That's his goal. That's what he's trying to seek for the government and mainstream science and media to do. And from what I understand, they're making some great progress behind the scenes in that area. But certainly, and who knows, maybe we'll see some line item in a budget somewhere for a Space Force or defense, which just got approved, I think, today, that does take this topic more seriously. But that's something they're currently working on just in the last few months and weeks here.
When it comes to like a Space Force and, the possible, like you said, killer satellite, it starts to make me think, well, we get enough nukes to blow ourselves up, I forget how many times. But the first country that would get, say, a killer satellite up there that could knock out other satellites and our defense system, it's just, what are we just going to keep building and building, and how many different ways we can kill each other?
Yeah, it's very possible there are killer satellites out there already.
Yeah.
There probably are top secret projects to do that. For instance, the Air Force Space Command has a secret space plane they've been flying up there for a long period of time. In fact, it looks like a mini shuttle. Yeah, and it's been up there it's been able to be in space for like a year. So we don't know what's on that thing. There's other defense projects. Technically, we have a treaty where no government is supposed to have any weapons in space, but these space treaties are not something really many governments take too seriously, for better or worse.
Yeah.
And the weapons they've been building are actually missiles. Now, Star Wars during the Reagan era was something that they were developing to actually defend against missiles, but it was a space-based laser that they were trying to build back then, or at least get funding for. And who knows, they might have built prototypes or maybe even working devices that are up there. But that's kind of the conversation there.
Yeah. There's so much we won't know and don't know, which is so who knows? Speculation. That's all we can do.
That.
Yeah.
Oh, which reminds me, in UFO news, just real quick, History Channel in the ramp up for Project Blue Book has been writing some more stories about UFO cases. Great ones, credible ones. Lubbock Lights they wrote about, but they also wrote about these UFO files that the Air Force destroyed regarding an interesting case from 1948. So they've got some great stories that they're posting there. And if you look up Project Blue Book History Channel, you'll find where they're posting all of those stories.
Excellent. Okay, Alejandro, thanks so much. And,
all right, thank you.
So we'll be looking for your show on Thursday. That is on the Open Minds YouTube channel, right?
Open Minds YouTube channel.
And that's 3 p.m. Pacific time. All right.
6 p.m. Pacific.
Oh, sorry.
No problem.
Okay. All right. Thanks a lot.
All right. Thank you. Talk to you guys later.
Yeah. All right. All right, everyone. So our guest, we've had him on. I think he was on possibly like a year and a half ago, I believe. JAN HARZAN he's an executive director from Mufon. And he has been in that position since 2013. He's done a lot of really good things with Mufon. He was with IBM in sales and marketing for 37 years. Ahead of that, he's had an interest since the age of 8. I do want to talk about I did last time, but I'd love to hear about his UFO sighting he had with his brother when he was very young. And the whole mysterious circumstance around that, anti-gravity and all that. We'll talk about that. So, Jan, welcome to the show.
Oh, good to be here. Thank you, Willis.
Yeah,
Martin.
Yep. It was good to see you in down at Cherry Hill in New Jersey at the conference. I do want to talk about that because that was really good. I really enjoyed that, and it's unfortunate that Luis Elizondo had to leave. It was really too bad, but it was good he was there. When he was there, it was really interesting.
Yeah. Lewis did a great job, I think, and people really enjoyed hearing him and hearing his talk about the program that he ran while he was in the Pentagon. Got a lot of positive feedback from that.
Right. And I noticed something that you were really keeping guard on him.
Me personally?
Yeah. When I was speaking to him in the when I was speaking to him in the lobby for a while, you said, "Isn't it time for your nap?" or something like that. You were really watching. You were his guardian through the whole thing, and you're basically protecting him. And there are at those symposiums every once in a while you get a nutcase that might come up and say whatever.
Actually, he took pretty good care of himself. He was there with his daughter and her 2 friends.
Yeah.
I had so many other things to worry about. He was the least of my worries, frankly. No, he did a good job, I think, getting to know people and meeting people. It was a great opportunity for people to come and meet him firsthand and have a little conversation with him, which I think is what a lot of people really enjoyed doing.
Yeah, I was telling this a couple of shows ago that I don't know how long I talked to him for quite a while in the lobby, and he was talking about things that he collected, and I was talking about my background and as an appraiser and all that. We had a great conversation, and after we said goodbye, I realized I never once mentioned the word UFO to him. We didn't talk about UFOs at all.
Yeah, he's actually he's a regular guy, and he'd actually made it a point when he was running the Pentagon's UFO program called ATIP that he made a purposeful decision not to read anything about UFOs and not to research UFOs because he wanted to kind of keep his mind clear for the data that was coming in from the different points in the military. So I think that's a hats off to him.
Yes.
I think a lot of people complain, gee, why don't we know more? Why aren't you telling us more? This and that. He only knows what he knows, and he only knows what he knows through the program he was in. I mean, that's his full sum knowledge, which is extensive. But I think a lot of people are thinking, gosh, show us the really secret stuff. And I don't think from his perspective, there's a lot of other secret stuff per se. But there certainly will be more information coming out very shortly that should be to all of our benefits, frankly.
Now, in your opinion, who is the Pentagon actually controlling that, or are there people still connected that he's still connected to that are controlling that, or is it to the Stars Academy?
Well, that's a very good question. I don't believe it's the Pentagon controlling that, based on the fact that these five gentlemen who stepped out to become part of TTSA, Hal Puthoff from this, his Earth Tech Technologies is one of the top scientists. You've got Chris Mellon, worked at the very top levels of government, including being Assistant Secretary of Defense. You've got Stephen Justice, who was the maybe number 2, 3, 4 guy at the Lockheed Skunk Works. You got Lou, who ran the Pentagon program. And then I don't know Jim Semivan, but I mean, obviously he was an operative in the CIA. But I mean, these folks all worked on programs within their own part of government that let them know that this was a real phenomenon, that it was, definitely something happening, definitely not us, and definitely something that was very advanced. And so collectively, they decided to band together and try to bring this information out from our government. So they have, just like I worked for IBM for 37 years, I have contacts back in IBM. It's becoming fewer and fewer the longer I'm away because they're all retiring, just like I'm sure it's going to become fewer and fewer for them. But I think they're just trying to get that information out. I mean, Lou's told publicly in the New York Times, and more recently that he was frustrated because he was seeing this incredible data, which he was trying to share with his superiors, and no one was listening. And so where have we heard that before? I mean, that's been the story for 70 years, basically, where we've been talking about this, trying to share information on it, and there doesn't seem to be anybody listening. It appears now that they're starting to get the ear of the folks, at least in our elected government. And I think that's the distinction. We have an elected government, and then we have a government that kind of runs itself. I call it the bureaucrats who've been there for, 10, 20, 30, 40 years doing what they do. So I think this is very, very positive. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, disclosure happened on December 16th. I mean, this is as good as it's going to get. I mean, we need to take it and we need to run with it, and we need to start to continue to push the boundaries of disclosure, because I think this is just step one in a much longer disclosure process.
I think so. I think, basically we had all the information ahead of time when they had that conference, but it was the New York Times that actually exposed it and made it go viral, basically. And right. It's kind of like I remember UFOs before, and now I know them after. And
right.
And all these, last week we had a great guest. We had Calvin Parker from the Pascagoula abduction case. And right. He is getting so much media because the media is now taking this more serious than they ever
seriously. Did. Exactly. And we saw that at our symposium. We had people attending from all walks of life who've never, ever attended a UFO symposium in their life. They're coming out now. They want to find out what's going on. It's now safe for them to come and talk about this subject. I had people there who were policy people from the government. I had people,
really? Wow.
Both local and national, and then also scientists. A lot of scientists showing up and wanting to sit and meet with these people, meet with Lou, meet with the other folks, and talk about the science behind this, because this is really going to open up a whole new world for all of us. I mean, I don't think people quite realize the tremendous advances that are going to happen in the next 10, 20, 30 years because of our ability now to open this up for discussion and make it safe for scientists around the world and engineers to work on this problem.
Yeah, I think it's wonderful. And the question had come up so many times in this short time I've done the show in 6 years, like, what is it going to take to have, science and other people take this more serious and examine it. And maybe we've crossed that threshold, and we'll be seeing some forward motion into what I've heard a number of people, and I can't say that I don't agree with it, and that is to one of the most important things of the 21st century, or of all time. Like if we find there's intelligent life, if that's what it indeed is. That we're seeing, we still don't know what we're seeing.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Well, that's gonna be the next step in the evolution. But let's just step back for a second. I mean, because scientists have been focused on this, but they've been very quiet about it. I mean, they've been kind of keeping it in the back room. for most of them. Now, many of them have not been focused on it because they've thought it was a bunch of nonsense. Those folks who have been focused on it now feel safe to come out in the open and talk about it amongst their colleagues. And I could talk about a group of scientists doing that right now. But those who have never been involved in it are now coming to the realization, this is something very, very advanced. This is something that I want to get on board with. This is the cutting edge of science. So what scientist isn't going to want to be on the cutting edge of science?
Right.
I think it's exciting. Yeah.
So hold that thought. We're going to go into break. So I'm on with JAN HARZAN. This is Martin Willis with Podcast UFO on KGRA Radio. And stay with us. We'll be right back.
We're clear, gentlemen. Very clear, and we've got 3.5 minutes in this break, Martin.
3.5 minutes. I got it. Okay. So, Jan, we're still live, and we're live on YouTube. So this is where we talk about other things besides the topic we were on, basically. So I do want to get into between the next break. I want to get into your childhood sighting, but and you lived in, was it Thousand Oaks, California?
Correct. Yeah, Thousand Oaks.
Yeah,
you're right.
Are you in that general area now?
I'm actually about an hour and 15, 20 minutes south there. I'm in Orange County now, so that's Thousand Oaks is north of Los Angeles to the west in Ventura County. You have to go through Los Angeles County to get to Orange County, and I'm down south. I'm about an hour north of San Diego. I'm about an hour south. Our headquarters is about an hour north of San Diego and about an hour south of downtown Los Angeles. So
now, what's the situation with the fires out your way?
Well, it's been pretty exciting out here. We had the other day, the skies were like dark brown.
Wow.
But we're used to this. I mean, I can remember fires since I was a kid growing up out here. So it's one of the 4 seasons, fire season.
It's a little bit early this year. It's heavy early, I should say. Wouldn't you think so?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely much earlier than we expected to happen.
Yeah, crazy times. Yeah, I know. When I was out there for 9 years, I was in Northern California, and I remember, like smelling smoke constantly, during one of the fires, but never like the south down there. And so, has that ever come close to home for you?
Well, I just remember when I was a kid, we had fires on all 4 sides of us. I was living in Thousand Oaks. We had Westlake and Lake Sherwood on one side and mountains on the other side. And it actually turned the sky black. So at noon, the sky was completely black, and there was a little orange ball up in the sky. You can see this little tiny, it was very faint, but that was the sun. It was the strangest feeling I'd ever had in my life.
Wow.
I used to be like almost like a total eclipse of some sort. Because the sky just
crazy.
Wow. It was scary.
I was out that way in the San Diego area. I lived out there for about 8 months or so back in 77. And it was 77. And I remember like climbing and the Chaparral Hills over by La Jolla over that way. I remember looking out toward like LA out to the ocean. And there was so much smog. There were the most beautiful sunsets, and that was before the the pollution control. Boy, that was really brutal back then. Do you remember having trouble breathing and all that back then?
I don't particularly remember having trouble breathing, but I will say this: that with all these fires going on currently, it has produced some very spectacular sunsets. We're close to the ocean out here, so we'll go down to the ocean side and look out over the ocean and. It's very, very pretty. I mean, I guess that's one positive sign of smoke is it makes pretty sunsets.
Right. Race, we're about ready to go back on?
Yep. We got 20 seconds.
Okay. All right. So you basically remember where we were. You were talking about science, the cutting edge of science. So,
I wanted to talk about some of these scientists if I could, just for a moment.
Yeah, sure. Yep.
All right, gentlemen, stand by. All right, Martin, here we go. In 5, 4, 3, 2.
All right, welcome back to Podcast UFO on KGRA Radio. My guest this evening is the Executive Director of Mufon, JAN HARZAN. So, Jan, we were just talking before the break about the cutting edge of science and scientists. So, yeah, I'd like for you to continue on with that, if you would.
Sure, I'd be happy to. One of the areas that I think is going to be exciting in the future is the faster than light travel. It's the whole physics behind how do you get from here to there. I had the opportunity after this was all announced to have a conversation with Hal Puthoff, and he told me, based on a conversation I'd had with Ben Rich many years ago, he told me, Jan, we now have figured out the equations. We know how they're doing this. And so I said, that's great, Hal. How are they doing it? And he said, well, they're manipulating space-time. And we know how the equations work, and now we have to kind of basically engineer it, if you will, engineer it into being. Because understanding the mathematics behind it is one thing, but building something out of it is a whole nother level of complexity. So, but there's a group of guys. I'm blessed to be on their distribution list. It's kind of fun because they're about, I don't know, 40 or 30, 40 or 50. I don't even know how many. I haven't even counted all the different email addresses. Physicists around the world that are working on this issue of faster than light travel. And James Woodward from Cal State Fullerton here, retired professor, he's been writing books on stargates and wormholes and how we're going to get from here to there. He invited me to be part of it. And these guys meet every year up at Estes Park, Colorado, or at least they did last year, and they'll do it again this year, at a conference called, it's an advanced propulsion workshop. And they meet there and they present papers to each other on their ideas on how to make this happen. And I was, like I said, I was blessed to be invited to come sit in as a fly on the wall. Now, I wish I could have understood a fraction of the mathematics that they were throwing around on the chuck, but my mathematics is pretty rusty after 40 years being out of college. But the thing is that these guys are all trying to figure out how to get us to the stars. And I think it's exciting, and I think we're going to do it here in the next 20, 30 years. Now, whether we've done it officially in the black or not, I don't know that we'll ever know that. I don't think there's anyone ever going to come out and say, guess what, we had interstellar travel back in 1977 or whatever. But I think what they can do is reinvent it in the white world, and I think that's what, as I look at this TTSA organization and the fact they've got Stephen Justice from Lockheed Skunk Works and Hal Puthoff as a chief scientist, it appears to me they're trying to actually do this themselves. There'll be plenty of other people doing it, and if there haven't already been some of our aerospace companies who have accomplished it. So for us, the excitement is having scientists involved in it, but more importantly, for us to be able to travel out amongst the stars as a civilization. And I think that's really exciting because you have to realize one thing. Once we get out there, once we're circling above a planet in a solar system in another galaxy far, far away, and we look down and we see indigenous life on that planet, we now become the aliens.
Yeah, we're the UFO.
And I think that's something, right. Yeah, we're the UFO. We're the aliens. And so I think that's really going to put it in perspective for everybody, what's going on right now here on Earth.
Wow, that's amazing. Now, when you spoke to Ben Rich, he has the famous saying that he can take ET home, or I believe something like that. We already have the technology to take ET home. I may be misquoting, but it was...
Yeah, I was...
Go ahead.
Yeah, we now have the tech. And so this happened at a UCLA alumni function. I'm a graduate of the UCLA School of Engineering, and Ben Rich was too. And I got a notification back in about 93 that he would be speaking on, I think it was March 23rd, 1993, to the alumni. So I went to this event, and he did a beautiful 40-slide set of his 40-plus years at the Lockheed Skunk Works. He had just retired as the CEO. He followed Kelly Johnson as the number 2 CEO of Lockheed Skunk Works. Kelly Johnson was the CEO who had the spy plane, the U-2 spy plane, and then also Ben Rich was his young engineer that was the engineer on the SR-71. And that was such a successful project that it catapulted him in line to take over for Kelly when he left. So he'd now spent 40 years there, all these different development projects, and he was presenting this to these UCLA alumni, Engineering Alumni Association, about 200 of us in this room. Tom Keller was there, as a matter of fact, too. He's also an alumni of the UCLA School of Engineering. And his last slide, it started off with the U-2 spy plane, and he had the SR-71 in there, and he had the F-117, and he had a whole bunch of other projects in between, many of them that we hadn't even heard of because they got killed. They were never implemented. But his very last slide was a black disc zipping off into outer space. And it was a slides. It was actually, Kodachrome slides, right? Zipping off in outer space. And he ended the talk by saying, we now have the technology to take ET home. And the whole room busted up laughing. All the engineers thought he was cracking a joke. And Tom and I just looked at each other like, did he just say that? And we couldn't believe it, right?
So we had there when he said that. That's, the famous quote. Wow.
Yep. I think it came from me. So it actually came from Ben, but I heard it. So we had to talk to him after the session, and he shared some things. Basically that we have the ability to travel to the stars, and it won't take us our lifetime to do it. That was one of his things. And the fact is that how does it work, Ben? Well, it works because we've found the error in the equations. Now, he would never answer the question because I did ask him directly. Hey, Ben, what are the equations you're talking about? I thought he was either talking about Maxwell's equations of electromagnetic theory or Einstein's general theory of relativity, or some combination of the two. He never answered the question, but whatever the equations are, and Hal did share with me that it's part of Einstein's general theory of relativity, which is how they're getting here. They're able to just tweak space-time just a little bit, which makes an opening for them to come through to our place in space and time, let's just say. Then the other thing, as he was walking out, I had a chance to grab him and ask him some more questions. I was trying to actually get to the answer to what he was talking about. And he asked me, I asked him, I said, Ben, so how does this engine work? How does that gets us out to the stars? Or something to that effect. And he spun around and he looked at me and he said, well, let me ask you a question. How does ESP work? And I was kind of taken back because I didn't know why he would ask me that question. So I just blurted out the first thing that came into my mind. And I said, I don't know. All points in space and time are connected. He said, that's how it works. And he turned around and walked out of the room. So I think as we talk about, people are now moving in the UFO field into consciousness and how does all this stuff work? It may all be interrelated to itself, in terms of how we figure out how does reality come into being reality? How do we manipulate or how do we interact with reality as human beings? And how do our minds work exactly? This may be a much bigger find for us than just some structured craft that's able to go interstellar. This might be a big opening for all of mankind in terms of what we're going to discover here.
Right. In that case, would something need a craft? It just seems. I know it's kind of a bizarre thing to say, but
no, maybe not. Maybe you don't need a craft. If you read, the Monroe Institute, Robert Monroe wrote a book. I'm not pulling up in my brain right away, but it was basically about the work that he did at the Monroe Institute there in Virginia. And he talked about training the CIA and different people how to go out of body. In other words, how to take their consciousness and remove it from the vessel we think of as a body and go out in space and be able to actually, the trick is not so much getting out of your body, the trick is really getting back into your body. So he would teach them how to find themselves again so that they could reconnect their consciousness with their physical body. But he talked about all sorts of places that they would visit and things they would see, and it was pretty fascinating to me reading that book. I'll think of the name of it and I'll tell you later. But but it goes right to your point, which is, do you need a physical craft to do this? And perhaps not. I don't know, but perhaps not.
I think last I had a show where I talked about there was a couple of sightings that are known that people think the craft itself is possibly organic and living. Have you ever heard of anything like that? That's bizarre.
Yes. Yeah, I have.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes ships are described as like a stingray, like almost a manta ray or a fish type of thing. Yes.
Yeah.
And the material sciences too. We're talking about these metamaterials and different things that are coming up in the news more and more. Our engineering level for material sciences is pretty advanced, but it's nowhere near as advanced as whoever these beings are that are bringing these craft here, because their technology is completely integrated, completely smooth. And I think that's how you tell the difference between ours, if you talk to Michael Schratt, between our craft and their craft, is ours look pretty angular. They got, hard edges in them.
Yeah.
Theirs are just complete. It's almost like it was like grown in a petri dish. It's so smooth and elegant looking.
Yeah. I want at some point tonight we're going to talk about Mufon and the amount of sightings and all that, and the type of sightings, because I think that's interesting. Triangle versus, lights in the sky versus disc and all that. How that's kind of seems to have changed. But let's rehash the story of you and your brother so long ago, back in 1965, and that amazing sighting. I'd love to hear that again.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So back in the 50s and 60s, when you opened the newspaper, more than likely you're going to see a UFO story there. And they didn't call them UFOs; they called them flying saucers. So this was all over the front page news. My father used to get 2 men's magazines, True and Argosy, and one month, I think it was a March edition back in the early 60s, they had an article there on NICAP and Donald Kehoe. And as a kid, about 7, 8 years old at the time, reading this, what I was impressed about was here was a man who had retired as a major in the Marines, who was running at that time, probably one of the largest UFO organizations in the world, NICAP, and he was telling the press that these were extraterrestrial craft that were coming here from someplace else, and that was so in opposition to what the news stations were reporting, because they would report these sightings, the newspaper would report these sightings, but they would always have some kind of a explanation. Well, it was probably a balloon, most likely a radar inversion or a weather inversion, causing radar blips or whatever. And so to have this man so honestly speak about this subject was really eye-opening for me. And so my brother and I got talking about this, and my brother's kind of one of these Tesla types. He was building crystal radios at the age of 7 years old, and fixing the neighbor's television sets at the age of 8 years old. I don't know how he knew to do this, but he was very smart that way. And we got talking about it, and we decided that these craft must be using some kind of electromagnetic propulsion system. So we said, well, and we were playing around with electromagnets and doing different experiments and things as kids ourselves. So we said, well, maybe we could build one of these things. So we decided what we needed to do was build a 30-foot craft in our backyard with 3 pulsed electromagnetic engines, and maybe we could get it to do some of the maneuvers these craft do. Don't ask me where that idea came from, but that's what we came up with. So one day my mother was going to the store, a thrifty drugstore, and she's invited us to go with her, mostly because she didn't want to leave us home to get in trouble. And so we went with her, and we were in the store waiting for her to do shopping. We were on the magazine rack looking at the magazines, and on the very lower shelf in the very back, the corner, was this half-size magazine called Flying Saucer Review. It was a British publication and was like $1, so we bought it, took it home with us, and we started reading it, and it said, these craft are seen around nuclear power plants, military installations, and places where anti-gravity research is done. So we looked at each other. We said, well, we're doing anti-gravity research. Maybe one will come here. Well, sure enough, within about a month, I was in my room early on a Saturday morning sleeping, and my brother came into my room. I was at one end of the house. He was at the other end of the house, and he woke me up. What had happened was my parents had 4 boys. We were living in a 2-bedroom house in Woodland Hills, California. So they built a 3-bedroom house in Thousand Oaks, California in '59, because they were going to put 2 boys in one bedroom, 2 boys in the other bedroom with bunk beds, and then they'd have the 3rd bedroom. Well, then they had another baby, which turned out to be a girl. So my father had to turn the garage basically into a bunk room so he could house all these kids he had. So I'm out in the garage sleeping. It was turned into it was a room, but it was our former garage. And he comes out there and he says, hey, there's somebody trying to break into my room. And I said, well, what do you mean? And he said, well, there's somebody, I can hear him jiggling the screen. And I said, well, did you look outside to see who it was? And he said, no, I didn't look out. So I said, well, let's go back and take a look. So we walked into the house, out to the back of the house where his room was. We looked into his room, and the drapes were drawn. And so we didn't see anything happening. So I said, let's go out, and we'll go out in the backyard and see. Now, it was 6:30 on a Saturday morning in April, right before time change. So the sun was already up. So it was very bright outside. And we're walking down the hallway, talking to each other. I'm looking back at him. And all of a sudden he says, look. And I spin around and look where he's looking. He's looking in our living room. We had a wall of drapes, which were all white, and the sun was coming in from behind him. I didn't see anything. So I said, what'd you see, Jeff? And he said, well, there was somebody standing against the window. I could see their shadow on the window. And when I told you to look, they floated backwards. And he used those words, floated backwards. And I thought that was really weird to describe something like that. So at this point, I'm thinking, well, he's just trying to, pull one over on me. He's trying to pull a fast one. We'll put this to bed. We'll go out in the backyard. There'll be nothing there, and it'll all be over. So I said, well, let's go out in the garage again. And as I walked through the kitchen into the garage, the clock said 6:30. That's how I know what time it was. It was 6:30. Went into the garage, out the back door to the end of the house. We looked back towards his bedroom, and there was nothing there. And so I'm thinking, okay, this is fun. Got me up at 6:30 in the morning, made this big spoof and everything. So I said, well, there's nothing there. So let's go back in. So we turned around and go back into the house. And as we turned around, there, 30 feet from us, hovering 10 feet off the ground, was a landing craft with 4 landing gear on it. And I thought, oh my gosh, these things are real. That was the first thing that went through my head. Oh my gosh, these things, look, there it is. These things are real. And then the second thought that went through my mind was, wow, this thing looks like it might be man-made. Now, why did I think it was man-made? Because the craft itself was like a brick. If you blew it up to 8 to 10 feet long by 4 feet wide by 3 feet high and completely smoothed the edges, so it was like a tank, completely seamless. And then put 4 landing gear on it. Now, the landing gear were blue corrugated hose, like a dryer hose. You ever see the dryer hose where it goes in and out?
Yeah.
That came out from the craft on both sides, 2 on each side, and then at the bottom was a black suction cup. And then between the landing gear, there were these crossbars with like a scissoring function. And in the middle of that scissoring function was a bolt. And it was the bolt that made me think this looks like it's man-made.
Yeah.
But then I started studying the craft, and I thought, wow, like it's not very tall. Like it's only 3 feet tall. How could they get in and out of this thing? Like they must not be very big creatures if they're inside this craft. And the second thing I thought was, wow, there's no windows or doors. Like how do you get inside this thing? Because there's no, at least on the side I was looking at. I was looking at 2 of the 4 sides of it. There's no windows or doors. And then I started looking at the actual surface of it, and it was a shiny, seamless piece of metal, the whole structure of the craft. No rivets, no seams, no nothing. And I thought to myself, wow, that's pretty good stuff, because I don't think back in 1965 we had the technology to do that from a manufacturing standpoint. So I said at that point, I said to my brother, I'm going to go and get a camera. I'll be right back. So I ran into the garage, and then I went to go into the house, and we locked ourselves out. So as I'm pounding on the door, he said, they go in the house. Now, remember, nobody was up when we went out. I mean, everyone was asleep. So we're pounding on this door. All of a sudden, I noticed a discontinuity in my knock, like that, like dunk, dunk, like that. Well, that's weird. But about 3 knocks later, the door opens up. My older brother's there. I go running in. I practically run over the top of him to get the camera. He's saying, "What's going on?" I said, "Nothing." And the reason I did that was I didn't want to slow myself down. So I ran and got the camera, ran back out. He was up watching TV, and my brother was standing on the swing set outside. Had climbed up to the top of the swing set where the slide is and was looking out to the west, and the craft was gone. And I said, "What happened?" He said, "Well, it was just frozen there," and it literally was frozen there in the sky. Now, it was making a humming noise. I forgot to mention that, but it was humming like a transformer on a telephone pole late at night. If you ever go down the street and you hear that humming noise, but it was perfectly still. And then he said it just slowly started to drift away after a minute, and then just shot over the horizon, just toosh, gone. So, we looked at each other like, what are we going to do now? No one's going to believe us. I'm 10, he's 9. So we kind of decided to keep it to ourselves, But the funny thing was, I went to school that Monday morning, and I was telling my best friend Tom about what had happened. And I said, "Tom, you won't believe what happened this weekend." And I went through the whole story that I just relayed to you. And he's looking at me, and he's staring at me, and he's staring at me. And so I finally paused so he could say something. And his answer to me was, "Do you want to go play baseball?" That's what he said.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking to myself, did you just hear what I told you? I just told you the most fantastic story in the world. And right then and there, it went bing in my head. It says, okay, this is not something you can talk to people about, because they aren't going to get it.
That is so funny.
Yeah.
Oh my God, that's right. So when you talk about the landing gear, this is interesting to me. It kind of reminded me, I'm sure we're about the same age. You watched the original Lost in Space, and the robot had that like corrugated arms, right? Very similar.
Yeah, it was very similar. Very similar. Yeah, it was round. I mean, it was round.
Yeah,
I think his arms were round too, if I'm mistaken. And it just went in and out. But it was like cobalt blue. It was like the craft was very ornate. It was like bright orange, these cobalt blue landing gear, black suction cups, and brown crossbars. I mean, it's like it's like some kid went crazy with his paint cans, spray paint cans, But that's what I saw. That's what I observed, and my brother observed. So
now at the time, well, no. Let me ask you this: now that you reflect on it, did you consider that it possibly could be man-made and like a secret government? But why would it land at 6:30 Saturday morning on your why would it be there then? I mean, that's bizarre.
Well, that's funny you should say that, because a good friend, Bill McDonald, who was active in the UFO field many years ago, and actually does artwork in this field. His father was the senior scientist at the Rockwell Science Center, which happened to be in Thousand Oaks at that time. And so when I told him this story, and he did a little bit of research on his own, he says, I think that's something my father built. And I said, Bill, it's very possible Rockwell could have built this thing. I'm not telling you they didn't build it, but I'd have to ask you, why would they be testing it in my backyard at 6:30 in the morning on a Saturday?
Yeah.
It makes no sense to me.
Yeah.
So could it be ours? Yeah, I've never said that it's definitely extraterrestrial, but I think based on the fact of the manufacture of the hub of it, the craft itself, I don't think it was ours. I really don't, if I had to put my money down.
Now, had you didn't have anything like missing time that you're aware of or anything like that?
No, I didn't have anything. Let's put it this way. I have no. There's two questions I guess. I have missing time, but the other one is being taken aboard the craft. I have no recollection of being aboard any craft or anything like that. But when I was doing that knock, and my knock stopped, I think it's very possible that they stopped time for however long they stop it for, however they do that. And the reason I say that is that my brother definitely has the symptoms of having been taken. He's gone through post-traumatic stress. He's got into drugs and alcohol. He was shown visions of the whole world being destroyed and a nuclear exchange between the U.S. and China. Basically, a lot of stuff that freaked him out.
Now, you're telling me that he had, during that experience, he could see something about the world being destroyed during that experience or afterwards?
I think it was after. I'd have to ask him that question, but he had told me sometime later that, Jan, I told you that there were little beings in my room like 2 weeks before this happened, and you and Joel would not believe me. And I do recall him saying something about it, but when your younger brother says to you, there's little beings in my room, it's like, what do you do about it? We said, okay, there's little beings in your room. But it didn't mean anything to us, right? But he also told me, probably 30 years later, he said, you realize when we went back into the house, the program that Joel, who's our older brother, was watching didn't come on until 8 o'clock. Now, remember, I stepped out at 6:30. I was out there maybe a minute or two. As far as I was concerned, only a minute or two had passed. Yet he's recollecting that we were out there for a good hour and a half to 2 hours. So
wow.
I don't know. I can't confirm or deny. I mean, it makes sense to me because my brother was up watching TV, which he was not when we went out. In those days, as you may recall, the TV sets, when you turn them on, didn't start instantaneously. It started with a little dot, and then it would go out, and then finally it'd be like a white screen, and then maybe the image would kind of come in.
Forgot about that. Yeah.
And he was up fully engaged in a program, so it would have had to happen very quickly. So I don't know, Martin. It's good. Yeah, I've thought about it.
Yeah. And it's interesting how you said it's had a negative effect on your brother, which is really too bad. If this is, related to that.
Well, I was going to say, that's exactly right. I mean, so I hear people who have, what they consider to be positive experiences, and I hear people who say they have negative experiences. So here's a case where one UFO, two individuals, brothers in this case, one went this way and one went that way with the experience, right?
Yeah.
One took it and made it a positive thing that drove his life and I don't know that I'd be sitting in the chair I'm sitting in today if it weren't for this occurrence, because I don't know that I have the same strong conviction without having seen this craft.
Right.
On his side, he's gone, suffering from post-traumatic stress, all the issues of dealing with that. Basically, why would you want to live if you thought the world was going to end in a catastrophic nuclear holocaust? I mean, it's like, why go get a career and have a family and do all this stuff if it's all just going to be wiped out? So, it's just interesting to me. And, that's one of the things why I really put a lot of time and effort and energy in this whole experiencer research team that we have in Mufon under Kathleen Martin and George Medich and a whole team of people, Don Dundary. There's just dozens of great people who are in that program, because they're really offering help to those who've had interactions with non-human entities, whether it be from a UFO or anything else that's happening, and trying to get them what they need, whether it be counseling services, just an ear to listen to, psychological services, try to deal with post-traumatic stress, whatever. There's a lot of people out there, in my opinion, that are hurting because they've been told that this is a bunch of poppycock, and yet they have the experience, and now what do they do with it? Because they're living it, but the world around them is denying it, and so they're caught in this catch-22. They can't speak to their family. They can't talk to their kids. They can't talk to their co-workers, or they'll lose their job. So they need some place to go, and that place to go really is Mufon at this point.
Right. All right. Well, we are at break time, so we're on with JAN HARZAN. This is Martin Willis with Podcast UFO. We're on KGRA Radio, and we'll be right back. Stay with us.
All right, gentlemen, that is a close for hour one. We have 4 minutes in this break, Martin.
Okay, 4 minutes. Got it. Okay.
Commercial free the second hour?
What? Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Okay. All right. Excellent. So I thought in the last hour we're going to take calls. And so, Evan, if you wouldn't mind, get the number up there for the people on YouTube. We're not going to take them during the break, but we'll take them when we come back on. And so that number will be up there on YouTube. You can check it out. And let's see. At the last break, we were talking about forest fires. We really went off topic, and pollution and all that. But on this break, something we can talk about for a short time is let's talk about California, because California is the number one state that listens to this podcast when I look through, the Google Analytics data. And do you think the reason California is where the number one sightings are, as far as the amount, is because of the usual really great weather and the population, or do you think there's more to it than that?
Well, I obviously, weather plays a good portion of it. We notice a big dip in our sightings around the November, December timeframe. And I think that's because most of the eastern seaboard and the central part of the country is under a lot of heavy cloud cover. So it helps. And in summertime, when it's usually clear out across most of the country, that's when we get the most of our sightings. So I think weather has a big part to play in it. I think the other thing is, California is, a lot of people are outdoors. I mean, they're doing stuff outdoors. You got to be outdoors. We find that there's two things in sighting reports that are common. If you want to see a UFO, this will greatly increase your chances. Number one, own a dog, because if you own a dog, you got to go take it for a walk, right?
The dog, yeah.
Yeah. And the other is smoking. Not that I endorse smoking, but I can't tell you the number of reports I read where it says I stepped out on my back porch to have a smoke.
Yeah,
and I saw
that.
This thing.
Yeah.
And so if you're not going outside and you're not looking, you're not going to see. So, but just a little tongue in cheek. But those two things do turn up a lot of times in our reports. That's just so funny.
Yeah. Just to let the person on YouTube know, I just saw someone try to call in, and if you're calling from Skype, I think it's not going to let me join you to the call, so you have to call from a phone line, it looks like. So anyway, if you would please don't call back until we start after the break, which is about 1 minute, just about a minute and a half, you can try again, but please try to call that number through a phone line. So the population is high. People are out smoking or walking their dog, but also, what else do you think? Do you think there's any type of like hotspots in California, or any reported to speak of?
Well, I Shasta, Mount Shasta is always.
I thought you were going to say that.
Mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but also Joshua Tree, is another. But I think a lot of those there because they're so clear. There's the night sky is so crystal clear there. Obviously, in downtown Los Angeles, you're going to get a lot of light pollution, so you're not going to be able to see a whole lot of anything. The San Luis Valley has always been a hot spot. That's in southwest Colorado. We'll be going there here in about a month here now. My wife, both my wife's parents are from the San Luis Valley.
Oh, really?
They grew up there.
Yeah, I just had Chris O'Brien was on a few weeks ago. He came out to visit me here. So, Race, we're on in about like 15 seconds, right?
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
Okay, we're ready here.
All right, stand by. Again, we're going for 1 hour. We're going to do commercial free for the back half for Jan. And here we go.
Yep.
In 5, 4, 3, 2.
All right, everyone, welcome back. It's Martin Willis with Podcast UFO. My guest this evening is JAN HARZAN, Executive Director of Mufon. And welcome back, Jan.
Thank you. Great to be here.
And so we are taking calls in this last hour. That phone number is up on the screen on YouTube. And if you're listening to KGRA Radio, I think Evan might be in chat. If not, if you go in there and put the number in, I'll just say it one time, but please do not call unless the show is live. I get calls all the time. And that number is 603-967-4030. Please only use that during the showtime hours. The 2 hours, that is. So we were talking, basically about your sighting and how it affected your brother. I think we do have a call coming in. So I'm going to grab that. Hello? Oh, it seems like it just, are you there, caller? Caller, can you hear me? I see we do have a caller on, but I don't think we can't hear you, caller. Why don't you try calling back?
Hello?
Oh, you there?
Yep.
Okay. What's your name? Where are you calling from? Your first name?
Hi, this is Jay Allen from San Diego.
Oh, hi. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
And if you could speak up a little bit, that'd be great. And you do have a question for, we have another person trying to call in. So do you have a question for our guest?
Sure, no problem. I just want to say, great storytelling. I love the show. I'm also an aerospace engineer, and
really?
And I've called in a couple times before. Yeah, it's been a while. But I don't want to be selfish, but I have a couple of questions, and then I can just kind of listen off. But mentioned Hal Puthoff earlier, and he's well known for his laser research with Russell Targ and NASA, and then they joined SRI to do the remote viewing program with the military. And I'm wondering if anybody's heard, or I'm wondering also why we're not hearing about Hal Puthoff setting up a remote viewing target to learn how these devices work, or where they come from, or how they're composed. And then, because that seems logical, he knows how remote viewing works already. And then, as far as, second question real quick, Tom DeLonge and his business model, which Hal Puthoff now works with, Tom DeLonge's business model is crowdfunding. So it seems to reason that if they have access to metamaterials that they're studying, if they could release some of the information about that, it seems to reason that they would increase interest like you wouldn't believe, and so crowdfunding would just come pouring in. If they're looking for crowdfunding, why not throw a bone out there? I know they've released some of the Pentagon videos that we've seen and on FLIR and things like that, but. I'm sort of wondering those two questions, and if Jan has any comment on that, that'd be great.
Thank you. Good questions.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's great questions. on the first one with regard to using remote viewing to kind of discern how these craft work, I guess the question I'd ask is what makes you think they haven't? And I'll leave it at that.
So I'm in that community and I haven't heard anything about it. So either they're keeping it very secret. So I'm actually writing my graduate thesis on that topic. So it's
you should just call Hal and ask him.
So I listen to his lectures and I go to the events that they have, and I've never heard anything about it. So I don't know if it's on the down low or what they're doing with it.
Well, I honestly don't know. He hasn't confided in me, but I'm assuming because they know it's a tool to be used that they would use it if it's in their arsenal to use. But again, I think it's best thing to address it to him directly, and you could call Hal up or send him an email if you need to know how to do that. Just send me an email at exe.dir@mufon.com. I'll be happy to put you in touch with him.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I was just wondering if you had heard anything about it because Hal's well known in the remote viewing field. Yet we've heard is sort of a segregation from his work with this UFO stuff, and I haven't heard him mention remote viewing in a very long time. So other than his,
Well, he's been working on faster than light travel. I mean, that's been his thing, in energy systems. So he's got some contracts with the government to kind of create and produce that stuff. I was surprised, honestly, to see him out in such public view because I've invited him for 20 years to come speak at MUFON symposiums, and because of his contract work with the government, he's been reluctant to do so. He's been a 25-year plus member of MUFON, so he definitely sees the value in MUFON and being a member. And he was the only physicist that called me after my conversation with Ben Rich went public and asked me questions about it. So I know he's definitely interested in it. I know he's doing some great work, and I know he thinks he's he's telling me anyway that they know what the equations are, and it's just a matter of taking those from mathematical, just like the stealth aircraft, which was a Russian mathematician's equations. They took that at the Lockheed Skunk Works and turned it into the F-117. Now we need to take these mathematics for faster than light travel through Einstein's general theory of relativity and manipulation of space-time and turn it into an interstellar craft. Right. Yeah.
Right. Well, just as an aside, as an engineer, I know that you can't travel at relativistic speed in a linear fashion. You're going to have to bend space-time because you're just going. If you hit anything, if you hit a piece of space dust, your whole ship's going to explode. So they're going to have to bend space-time. So if they've worked the math out, it's going to have to be an energy problem that they need to solve right now. And I can't imagine when that happens, we're going to have.
Well, you hit the nail on the head because what he told me was, Jan, there's two ways to do it. You either have a large mass. But it's hard to go grab a mass the size of the sun or Jupiter and start hauling it around, or you have to have a high energy source.
Mufon and
wait.
To the Stars Academy.
Okay. I'm sorry.
Okay. Yes, I think
that's not for me. Sorry.
No, I think her question was, what about Tom DeLonge and the To the Stars Academy? Because that was your second question, right? Which is how.
Yeah. So my second question was, just to reiterate. I'm sorry for interrupting. My second question was, if Tom DeLonge's, I understand how the To the Stars Academy is set up, and what they're looking for is a crowdsourcing, crowdfunding model. And if they're just going to release Pentagon videos, they're going to gather a little bit of interest. But if they have metamaterials, something physical somebody can touch, and we can actually evaluate that, then that's just going to blow the lid off. I'm wondering what's taking them so long if they actually have these. Why not announce it and then let's get the ball rolling? It's sort of a logical question.
And again, right, absolutely. And I don't want to answer on behalf of To the Stars because that's not for me to do. But I would just tell you this: based on what I know, watch this space sometime between now and the end of the year.
Right.
Copy that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. We have another call that's very, very persistent. So I'm going to bring this person in. Boy, you are persistent.
Sorry.
What's your first name and where are you calling from?
My name is Bambi, and I'm from Philadelphia.
Hi, Bambi. You have a question for our guest tonight?
Yeah, I'm asking JAN HARZAN. Well, what's the difference between Mufon and To the Stars Academy? How are they different?
Okay, well, and I think Lou answered this question on stage at the symposium. He made a real good comment, a couple of very good comments. One was the fact that it's not the purpose of government to fulfill the idle curiosity of the masses. It's the purpose of government to protect its people.
But Mufon is a civilian-based organization.
Yes, we're civilian-based, exactly.
Right.
So,
and they do, and don't they do reporting and investigations?
Yes, absolutely. So, I mean, basically, Mufon is a civilian 501c3 nonprofit, and our whole role in life is collecting reports from the public, the general public, of what they see, and then we train investigators who can go out and vet these reports and determine what exactly the person saw and report that back to the public. So I think what Lou said was that the information that Mufon has been producing for the last 50 years was, in fact, some of the information that they used, because we make it publicly available, to help actually justify and get the ATIP program approved and running. So I think that's very positive. I mean, we wouldn't have had ATIP, which is now coming out in the press, showing that our government is, in fact, interested in UFOs. And this all would not have happened without Mufon doing the great work it's done for the last 50 years. So thank you for asking that question.
You better stay at it.
Well, we plan to. we plan to.
Okay.
There's no reason to stop now.
All right. Thank you for the call. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay. So, that I like his the last caller's question prior to that, about getting the bone out there, and I think, the transparency part of this is pretty important, and why, they need to, no matter who they are there in that seat, they're going to have to gain trust of people before anyone's going to really divulge something important. Alejandro was basically talking about that, maybe another show a little bit earlier talked about it. So they really have to, the questions come up a bunch of times on this show, and that is, why do they need funding? Well, they're starting to show why they need funding now because of the different things they're doing that are costly. Mm-hmm. So I think that part is going to reveal itself. But it would, I think the trouble that we can have is the disconnect. And, also your opinion on this too. Let me get your opinion on this. And that is the reluctancy of, like, for instance, I had contacted you a number of times and said, hey, any chance you can get Lou Elizondo on my show just briefly, and we'll talk about the upcoming Mufon symposium and all that. And it has to go through publicists, has to go through lawyers, and they're basically saying, no to everybody because they want to make sure that he's only on like Coast to Coast or some major media show, but not someone. I'm gathering this. Tell me if I'm wrong. They don't want him on some show that could be construed as fringe in some type of way to muddy the reputation of what he's doing. Is that kind of where that you think that might be going?
Well, actually, Lou would go on anybody's show. He's very much a people's person. I mean, he's a very enjoyable guy. The problem is there's only so much of him to go around, so they're trying to protect him a little bit with, I think, I'm speaking, I really can't speak on their behalf, but I'm just surmising they're protecting him because otherwise everybody wants a piece of him. And there's only so many pieces of them to go around. The fact that he spoke at the Mufon Symposium is a monumental deal because originally I was told by Tom that he would not be speaking at any UFO conferences. So, if you would like him on your show, I'll do my best to try to get him on your show. All I could say is I don't control him. He's actually works for TTSA, and they book all of his appointments. So But I could tell you that he himself would do anything because he's
like that.
He feels it's he just thinks it's so important that people really understand that this is a real deal and that it's important for us to be focused on it. And he's trying to spend his time working with the right people. By the right people, I mean people who are actually in a position to be able to do something about it on behalf of all of us. to make it happen. So
Yeah.
we need to be supporting him. Good.
Right. I'll bug you until you get him on my show.
Okay.
We have
All
a
right,
caller.
Mark.
Caller, what's your first name and where are you calling from?
Hi, this is Jordan from Canada.
Hi, Jordan. Welcome to the show.
It's great to be here, Martin. It's your friend Jordan, just in case you don't recognize my voice.
Oh, yes. Hey, how are you?
I'm doing great. I had a question for Jan. I'm glad to see him on the show because there's something that's been bothering me for a while, and I really wanted to hear him address it. In fact, it's been brought up on your show a few times, and that is some of the allegations that were made against Mufon in their handling of the what was seen as racist comments by the director from, I believe, from Pennsylvania. I know Jan released a statement after this all happened, but I'd just like to hear him talk about it. And just to back up one more second is I myself am a lapsed Mufon member as a result of the handling of this situation, and I really want to get back on Team Mufon. So I just hope he can make me feel better and let me know that Mufon doesn't support those types of comments.
Well, I can tell you absolutely Mufon doesn't support it, and there's nobody in Mufon that's a racist or any of that. I mean, if we're going to ever move to the next step of being part of an intergalactic society, we first got to get along amongst ourselves. So that's very, very important to me. And, as you know, we released John from his – it's a volunteer job, so I mean, we released him from his duties. He's very remorseful about what happened, has apologized for it consistently and many, many times. Unfortunately, the damage was done. So when you have someone who's out there on their own personal Facebook page making comments, I mean, this becomes the challenge of a corporation, whether it's a corporation or a nonprofit like Mufon, is how much do we control our – now, these are volunteers. We don't have employees. I mean, there's only 3 employees in all of Mufon. I'm one of 3. So how much do you actually control that? But at the end of the day, the comments are comments, and you've got to take action based on those comments, and we did that. John is kind of dismissed himself from Mufon and is off doing his own thing, and I wish him well. And, he would be the first one to tell you that he's very remorseful for what happened, and if he could take it all back, he would. So that's all I can tell you.
Yeah, and one other thing is there's been some criticism or maybe some allegations made primarily by Chris Cogswell, who left Mufon as a result of the handling of John. The allegations Chris Cogswell had made is that John may have stepped down as director, but is still largely working with Mufon behind the scenes. Can you tell me, is he still with Mufon in some capacity? Maybe not an official director, but is he still working with Mufon?
Well, no, he's not.
Hello?
You can hear me?
Yeah, we hear you on this end. We just have so many calls coming in for some reason.
I was just gonna tell you guys about a UFO sighting.
No, caller, you're gonna have to wait. Yeah. You're gonna have to wait your turn.
Sure. Okay. Yep. I'll wait.
And please, anyone that calls in has to mute their computer. Please mute your computer.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I'll turn it right down now.
Go ahead. I'm very sorry about that, everyone.
That's okay.
So I think it's Jason. It's Jason, right? Up in Canada.
Jordan. Yes.
Jordan, I'm sorry, I apologize. So Jordan, so the answer is no, he's not. He's no longer. I mean, you could be a member of Mufon, right? John had bought a benefactor package years ago, so I mean, he gets the journal. I mean, he's like a subscriber. It'd be like getting National Geographic in your box. So I don't consider that to be necessarily actively involved. So no, he's no longer actively involved in Mufon. I mean, could he volunteer?
Including.
Could he volunteer? Go ahead.
Yeah, and I was going to say that includes like planning of the symposium and working in that type of capacity.
Yeah, well, so when he was state director, we put the symposium in Philadelphia, actually Cherry Hill, New Jersey. He was the state director at the time. Since that time, he was removed, but he was the guy who originally set it up. So we had to get a different team to go in there and run the symposium, which we did. Jennifer Stein, her team, Fred Saluga, Bill Weber, and the other guys who pitched in to make it happen.
Okay, and I don't want to beat a dead horse, but the allegation Chris Cogswell made was as recently as just a few months ago when he resigned as I believe director of research for Mufon. At that point, what he said in some of his interviews was that John was still working for the symposium, which led to Cogswell's resignation. Is that not correct?
Well, John had volunteered to help out if they needed him. Now, John was not at the symposium, so I'd say it's not correct. But, I mean, anyone can volunteer to help. We're not going to turn people away. We're not going to check everybody's Facebook pages and make sure that they're all totally clean. We're going to let people do what they want to do because it's a volunteer organization. But John is no longer associated with Mufon. That's the bottom line. Yeah.
After the recent symposium that he volunteered for, having already been outed as a known racist that was either quit or resigned. Oh, okay. I follow you.
Okay.
All right. Well, thank you for answering that question.
All right, Jordan. Thanks for the call, Jordan. You take care.
Thank you.
All right. Now we have another caller. We have a bunch of people trying to call in. And if you could please, if you're calling in, make sure you mute your computer. And also be patient. We have a caller now. Your first name and where are you calling from?
Hi, I'm Kevin Needham, and I'm from upstate New York, about 6 miles north of Lake George, New York, about 50 miles north of Albany. I just wanted to let you guys know that I've seen some things in the sky, and I know exactly what they are. I know they're not ours. Probably about 5 years ago, I had to be to work at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and I left exit 21 off of the Northway heading south. And it was a very, very, very windy day. It was cloudy, but it didn't black out the sun. There were just patches of clouds. And I drive a Honda Element, and it's got I've got a lot of visibility in the front windshield. So I left my house at 1 o'clock. I have a GPS with a Bluetooth capability on it, hands-free. And I drove down the road heading south, and I see this little black straight line up in the sky to the left, and it looked like it was 3,000 feet up. But it didn't shine in the light off, and I thought it might have been an airliner, right? So I'm coming up the Northway, and there's an incline to the Northway, and I lost track of it between the north and the southbound lanes. The trees blocked it out. I got up toward the top of the hill, and the next exit was exit 19 of the Northway, which takes you into Glens Falls, Queensboro, New York. And probably, about a half a mile from the exit, I see this black line that's a lot closer, and it's a lot lower because it's closer. And I've seen a beautiful blue light blinking from end to end of this little black stick. And it was going very slow, and it was kind of low. And I get about a quarter of a mile from the exit, and I'm looking at a 90 to 100 foot diameter classic disc, solid. It was all black. There was not a seam in it. It looked like it was liquid metal. Mm-hmm. And it was only about 300 feet in the air, and it was going from my left to my right. And I told my girlfriend, I said, "You wouldn't believe what I'm looking at right now. Nothing was blocking this out at all. It was like looking at your face right now on the screen, that clear." When it went overhead and to my right, I was probably, I was going to turn off on the Northway and make a right. And I started slowing down. I said, she goes, "Get out and get a picture." Well, when you see something like that, I don't know, you kind of freeze a little bit because you don't want to miss what it's going to do. You're afraid if you're going to get out, you're going to miss it. So I'm watching it. I'm looking at drive, and I pull over to the right. And right underneath it, there was a circle that was dead center, flush up against the bottom of it. It was color of a milk carton without the milk in it, a light gray. Mm-hmm. And that blue light that I had seen was actually, probably an optical illusion or whatever, because there was one blue light that was going around the center of this UFO counterclockwise, very slow. And it did a very slow wobble from my left to the right. And I would say that thing wasn't going more than 45 miles an hour. Like I said, it was huge. It was huge. It couldn't have been a balloon. It wasn't no balloon. It's nothing that we have on this earth. And so I got off to the on-ramp, got out and looked, and there's some trees to my right. I couldn't see it. I got on the ramp, went over, took a quick left over off of X19 there to a mobile station, get out in the parking lot and looked, and it was completely gone. It wasn't there anymore. A couple days ago at work in Lake George, I was telling this kid that was like 17 years old about what I had seen, And he says, that sounds familiar, that story. He says, when I was about 5 years ago, I was going to Queensbury Central School. He said there were some kids that saw something just like that. So that was just verification of it. So I never did report it. I've never made any reports to Mufon and stuff, but I know what that is, and I know you guys know what it is too. That's nothing that we have.
Yeah, and you could also. Yeah, no, that's a great report. I mean, you should still share that with Mufon. We get a certain fraction. I don't know if it's 15, 20% of our reports every year that are actually from prior years, and some going back many, many years. I never reported my sighting in 1965. I did put it in the Mufon database a little bit later, but I think it's important we collect this data because it's important. The scientists are using this. Go ahead.
Yeah, I should because I was going to work that day and I had to be at work at 2:00. So I saw that about 1:10 p.m. in the afternoon. I had told my supervisor and another lady that worked at the place where I was at, and she told me that she had worked. I said, you wouldn't believe what I saw. And she goes, what? And I said, didn't you tell me you used to work for the CIA? And she goes, well, I work for the CIA in some sort of capacity. And I told her, and she just smiled. She goes, wow, that's something. I said, have you ever seen anything like that? And she goes, I haven't. She goes, but I had a male friend of mine that lived in Queensbury, over by the Queensbury School, that years ago had filmed something in the air, and he'd reported it. And I think the FBI showed up, or some government agency, and took his pictures. They showed up his doorstep, and they took him away from him. So,
yeah. All right. I appreciate that. Thanks a lot. Go ahead.
What I always tell,
thanks.
Yeah, what I always tell people is if you ever have someone approach you and demand to have your pictures, ask to see their identification first and write down their name and the organization they're with, because we get these reports all the time from people saying, this was taken or that was taken, but they can't ever tell me who took it, and that's very frustrating.
I agree. The only thing is, like
here we go.
We lost him.
Yeah, I think that was. I think
hello.
Again, I might have done that again. I had my hand near it, and I think I did that by accident. I did that 2 weeks in a row now. So anyway, that's interesting. So we have another caller on, and your name. Where are you calling from?
Yeah, this is Ronald from Minnesota. I'm Earth Radio on the chat. So Earth Radio.
Yep.
I had a question for JAN. I tried to contact the director in Colorado. I'm trying to collect the state directors' names and email addresses and things to get stories so that we can share them, so that I can share them on my station. You know? And I would like to. My goal for that is to get the information out there and make people a little bit more aware of what we're talking about, and of course to make people a little more comfortable about what we're talking about. Right. The whole point is to lessen the fear of what we think UFOs are. And a lot of people think they're aliens, they're evil, or whatever, and I don't think they're any of those things. I think it's just something we don't understand yet. And part of the understanding is knowledge, and so I think that if I have some shows where I can share, I already talked with Eric Hartwig of Massachusetts.
Sure.
And so he's a state director of Massachusetts. And I'd like to get some more state directors have had experiences that can give me some, good information that I can share, on my station or on my website, which is the same, earthradio.com. And I think we're all in the same ballpark of trying to get the information out there. We need to be on the same page now.
Oh, absolutely. Well, God bless you for doing that. That's awesome. So here's how you.
You're welcome.
Here's how you go about doing that. You go to the Mufon.com website. You run your cursor over Join, and the drop-down menu comes down. And about the fifth one down is Find a Chapter. Click on that. It'll bring up a page, and you scroll down the page. It has all of our state chapters listed, all our international chapters listed. And there'll be email. Okay. Yeah, and there's a little box that says, send an email. If you run your cursor over that little box that says email, you'll look in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen. You'll see the actual email address, so you can type those in. Unfortunately,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That's easy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
All right.
Good luck.
All right, good deal.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thanks for the call.
Thank you. Bye.
All right. So let's kind of shift gears a little bit here, Jan. You were talking about the use of Mufon basically helping, things along here. Do you think the government, here's the question. I'm going to ask two different questions here. First of all,
sure.
Do you think the government, my thoughts are they don't, they know what they're seeing? What are your thoughts?
I think they have a pretty good idea on what they're seeing. You'll notice they're not talking about it, mainly for two reasons. One is because it's going to open up a whole nother. At the beginning of the show, I talked about this is step one to disclosure, is just coming to the stark realization, all of us on this planet, that we're not alone. And today, although we all believe, all the people listening on the show probably believe, the vast majority of the general public doesn't believe. Or they may think that there's other people out there, but they think it's somewhere far away. It's not affecting me now. I mean, it's very clear to me they're not only here, but they're here. So I think we have to get everybody on that page first. And then the next step becomes, who are they? Why are they here? What do they want? And those kind of questions. And that is going to open up a whole nother conversation that's going to be all over the place. I mean, it's going to be everything from the devil and the demons to, interdimensional beings, to time travelers, to, extraterrestrials living on other planets, to other people living in other universes, other dimensions, other places in space and time. I think space-time is really the key here. That's why I talked about that book by Robert. I'm blanking on his name now. The guy who founded the Monroe Institute. So it's Robert Monroe who wrote the book, because he talks about these people going out of body and going to these other places in space and time. We might find our universe is much more strange than we ever thought it was. But I think there's nothing that says it can't be all of these things. It can't be all. It could be all of these things happening simultaneously and getting reported to us as UFOs or as ETs, and we're just writing it all down. What about the cryptoids? What about these strange animal types that run around? Where does this all come from? And maybe it's all tied back to consciousness. So I think they need to first just get the fact that these things are real, they're here, they're physical, they're technological, and they're advanced, and they're not us. And once you get beyond that, then you can go to the next set of questions confidently and start tackling that. And that'll probably take us another 50 years to figure out. Yeah.
When I had that, I had scheduled the one-on-one, dinner with Luis Elizondo, and I wish his name wasn't so close to Alejandro Rojas. I get the two confused sometimes.
Elizondo,
yeah. So when I had that scheduled before we had to leave on the emergency or whatever it was, the one question I was going to ask him is, why now? Why did this come out now? And that wasn't my question. I think that was Stan Friedman. I asked him like the week after this came out, and that was his first question, was why now? And that's one question I wanted to ask him. And there was a question that came in the chat room that I have to direct toward you. But before that, what do you think about the why now thing?
Well, I'd ask the question, why not now?
But do you think there's some type of event that is like heading our way or something for the reason? Or do you just...
I don't know. Yeah. I don't know. I don't think so. I hope not. I hope not. I think, and I've written about this for the last couple of years as executive director, we are living in a time when you've got all these private space programs, SpaceX, Virgin Galactic, Bigelow Aerospace. There's actually about a half dozen to a dozen of these guys that are out there. Blue Horizon by Bezos and his group, Amazon. I mean, they are out there pushing the boundaries of space travel. At the same time, you've got NASA pushing the boundaries of warp speed, trying to get out intergalactically, get out interstellar. So we are right on the precipice of about to be heading out there in mass. I mean, it's no longer the 357 or however many astronauts that have been. It's going to be all of us out there in space. So once you're there, it's hard to hide anything. I mean, you're out there, right? So I think it's just time for it to come out. I mean, and it's always possible there's some kind of event coming. I don't I've not heard about it. I don't know anything personally about it. I hope it's not coming. But I welcome the fact that we're now starting to talk about this in intelligent, circles, right? I mean, we have actually people who before would laugh at any of us for what we do, and I have plenty of people laugh at me. Now saying, "Oh my gosh, what you said was true," and I'm like, "Yeah, I've been telling you it's true," So it opens up the dialogue to a much broader audience, and it incorporates all of humanity, not just those people who are part of the UFO community. And I think that's terrific.
One of the questions that came in the chat room, the guy wrote something along the lines he wanted me to ask you if since you were basically hanging out with Lou Elizondo, did he tell you anything juicy? And if he did, you can't confirm or deny it, right?
No. He didn't tell me anything secret. What he did tell me was, look, Jan, I still hold security clearances, and I am not going to violate a security clearance. I think there was some confusion back when the Tic Tac video came out that people were saying, "Oh, we've got this classified video." Well, it wasn't classified. It was actually marked as I understand it, it was marked as not highly unusual, but basically it's the level right below classification, but it's basically where it's very important kind of stuff. So they were able to get it out of the Pentagon and get it released for the public. What he has told me is their intent is to not stop until they have the ear of Congress and the people who can make a difference about this, and that they have the scientists working on these issues in a positive way. So I see everything that they're doing as very, very positive for ufology, for everything we fought for 70 years or more. Certainly, I can't find fault in anything they're doing. Lou was very clear at the symposium that, look, the role of the military is to protect you. Their role isn't to make friends with aliens. So they're going to go put a battle plan in place for how you protect people from this. Now, that doesn't say that we don't do the same thing for China or for Russia. Now, that's me speaking. We do the same thing for China and for Russia. I mean, I have neighbors who are buying homes next to me in my neighborhood. I don't know how yours is, who are Chinese. I mean, they don't even speak English, but they're coming here from mainland China because they have money. They're buying up property because they want to diversify their money outside of the Chinese economy, I assume. And they're Chinese. Yet, I mean, I'm sure our government views the Chinese as one of our biggest quote unquote enemies in the standpoint, from an economic standpoint, from a military standpoint, from all these other things. That doesn't mean we're not friends with them. That's not mean we're not associating with them. But the role of military is to worry about those kinds of things. The role of us as citizens is to worry about how to get along and how to create community, and that's what we should be trying to create here.
Right. We have a question for you, Jan. Yeah, thanks for that. That's good. Let's see. Matt wanted to know if you thought that it's possible that UFOs influence people. In other words, influenced you to doing what you're doing today. Do you think they do that purposely?
Can people be influenced by UFOs? I think, from what I have observed and what I've read and what I know, I'd say yes. Let's just leave it at that. Yes.
Yeah. Well, interesting. And now, I had heard, this is secondhand, of course, and I don't even know if there's any truth to it at all, but wondered if you had heard something similar to this, that there's another additional program going on than there was all along, besides the one where Lou was working in. Have you heard that?
Yeah, and Lou actually addressed that at the symposium. There was another program called CCW something, or it was like 8 letters long. And it was a much broader program, and it was the program before he was brought into. When he was actually brought into that program, as it was closing down, and they tried to refocus the program into just UFOs because the other one was too broad. And the ATIP program, the Advanced Aerial Threat Identification Program, became born under Lou, and he ran that for the next 10 years, I believe. So yeah, he did mention that, and he said that's where some of that confusion comes from, is that the original program was called this, but then it got morphed into the thing called ATIP. And I saw that in IBM. You would programs would start out and they'd be called something, and then they'd morph into a different kind of a mission statement and be called something different, but it was really a continuation of the same program. So that's all I know about it. And Lou did address that at the symposium.
Something I chatted with you, prior to the show on different topics, and one of them was someone's addressing that in the chat room right now, and he wanted me to ask you, how can MUFON really be considered a reliable group studying and researching UFOs when they deal with the likes of Corey Goode and David Wilcock? And I mentioned something similar to that to you ahead of time. Like, for instance, the time travel, what's his name? Basio? I can't remember his name. But, there was that.
Basiago.
Yeah.
Andrew Basiago.
Yeah. So it's kind of a good point. And I wondered what your thoughts were about that.
Sure. Let me address that. When we put our program on for 2017 for the MUFON Symposium, the topic we chose, every year we pick a different topic. Next year will be the 50th anniversary of MUFON, by the way, just so you know.
Oh, yeah.
It'll be here in Irvine, July 26th, 7th, and 8th at the Irvine Hilton. The Hotel Irvine. It used to be the Hilton. But so in 2017, we selected the topic, the secret space program, or the case for a secret space program, because there had been like 6 books written in the last 6-8 months about this thing from different authors. And they all had kind of similar stories to them, but they were all written from a different perspective. And some of the people called out in those books were the likes of Corey Goode, Andrew Basiago, and others. So what we tried to do was put together a symposium where people could come and hear from the scientist types. We had James Woodward talking about the work he's doing in faster than light travel. Other scientists come and talk about the work they're doing. We had some notable researchers like Michael Schratt, Mark McCandlish, and others who came and brought their UFO research study, plus the attachments they've had within the aerospace community, where they've been told things that were probably classified, I'll be honest with you, but they were told things that they could share with the group. And then we had, out of the 12 speakers, I think we had 2 speakers who could be considered pretty much out there. And the reason they're out there is because you can't really verify their claim. So you got Corey Goode, who was claiming he had traveled in a secret space program out to, I believe it was Mars. I could be mistaken, but I think it was Mars. And of course, Andrew Basiago, who claims he was part of a teleportation team that had actually been on a group with I think Obama at the time. So we took everything from the hard scientists through the UFO researchers to what we would consider the far out boundaries of the whole topic, but it was all bound within the topic. And I was very clear in my video on the website that this was really an opportunity to come and hear the entire spectrum of the secret space program and make up your mind for yourself. MUFON doesn't try to tell people what to think. We collect data from the public. We investigate the data and try to weed out all the non-UFO stuff, and we try to publish the UFO stuff back to the public. In fact, one of the things I like to tell you about is a book we came out with, Roger Marsh and our communication team, called the Cases of Interest for 2017. It's 2018 Cases of Interest. It's all our top cases of interest for 2017. So we are here collecting the data for scientists to use, for the public to use. Anyone who liked the data, that's what MUFON does. That's our core competency. Once a year, we put on a symposium. We pick a different topic. This year's topic was UFOs, extraterrestrials, and the future of humanity. Based on the fact that all these new things are coming out, we thought, hey, this is a good time to say, how is this going to impact us as a society from a religious standpoint, from a scientific standpoint, from a financial standpoint, things like that. So it's more, we just put it out there for the public discussion. No one's saying that you have to believe any of the stories you heard. Certainly, people don't have to believe my own story that I told, but it's just it's just there for discussion. And it tried to, and I'll tell you, it was our most successful symposium ever. We had more people attend this symposium than any time in our past history.
That's because people. Yeah, that's kind of disheartening, but I get it.
We had 10 of the 12 speakers who were grounded scientist type people. I mean, they were, so it's not like we put on a whole dog and pony show. I mean, it was a very well-run conference, and people did enjoy being there. If you don't like, I had a guy come up at this last conference. He didn't like one of the speakers because he didn't agree with them. I won't go into that, but hey, you're welcome to disagree with people. I mean, as long as you're agreeably disagreeable. I mean, let's agree to disagree, but then let's have conversation about it. Where I have a trouble is where people throw down the gauntlet and they walk away because they are so disgusted because it's not in line with their way of thinking. Look, I see people all the time I don't agree with, but I don't, walk away from them. I sit and talk to them about why they think the way they do. I try to understand. Seek first to understand, then be understood. That's one of the premises of the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. So that was the whole purpose of that whole conversation that happened in 2017. And it's come, it's gone, and we're on to the next. So
yeah,
did you get
was there a lot of grief because of that? Did you get a lot of grief?
I got a little hate mail, but I get hate mail every year, so I'm used to the hate mail.
Yeah. Well, I got to tell you, I was at Alejandro's conference out in Phoenix a couple of years ago, and the most bizarre the people that spoke there. I mean, they were just way out. I wasn't buying any of it. They got the most applause. They got a standing ovation, and in a way. You sort of see like this cult type movement when you see something like that happen, And
go
ahead.
Well, I think that's a thing that's having people really scratch their heads about TTSA. Like, what's this all about? Like, is the Pentagon running this thing, or like is the CIA who's running this thing, right? Because people, we've heard the stories. I get the phone calls from people. I worked at Area 51 with aliens, this, that, and the other thing. The problem is you can't verify any of it. And I've asked Lou these tough questions like, do you think there's a secret space program? Well, of course there's a secret space program. The question is, how advanced is the secret space program? Because we know the X-37B, which is built by Boeing, is that Air Force small shuttle that goes up and takes classified payloads up into space that's been up there for as many as 2 years before they bring it back and land it at Edwards, or wherever. I think they landed at Edwards. I'm assuming they do. So we know there's a secret space program. I mean, it just is. The question is, are we out interstellar like Star Trek, or are we just kind of floating around in orbit around the Earth? How far advanced is it? So I don't know. I think people get frustrated because they believe there's more going on than what they're being told, and the answer to that is probably yes. On the other hand, and I think as Lou put it out to the group, is that it's not the purpose of government to fulfill the idle curiosity of the public. It's the purpose of government to protect its citizens. So if you're looking for answers to these things, it's going to be through a Mufon or through a TTSA or through other organizations that might do that. So I just had a gentleman come visit me on Friday. He was at the symposium. He wants to start a policy group on this whole subject. He sees it as the next great thing for mankind. And I'm fully supportive of what he's trying to do, and we're going to work with him on that. There needs to be more discussion, more conversation, just like you have at the United Nations or in our Congress on the topic. Meanwhile, the military will do what the military does. The CIA will do what the CIA does. And others should do what they do best. So I don't know if that answers your question or not, but
yeah. Another thing, you talked earlier about kind of how there was some type of connection with the possibility that helping the government along with this. Do you think they were active in MUFON in some capacity as far as doing research on cases or anything? Do you think they were using MUFON as any type of tool? I'm not saying covertly, I mean openly.
Well, yeah, I mean, Lou told me that the DIA did use our files to help put the case together to take forward to get ATIP funded. But it's publicly available information. I mean, anyone can go on our site and look up cases and see what people are reporting. So, yeah, I think they use it. I mean, I've been told by Chris Mellon that, from his perspective, the people he's talked at the top levels of the NSA, CIA don't give a hoot about MUFON or what we do. I find that hard to believe because I think we do important work, and I would think they'd really want to know what we do. But I can see where they're focused on, what's going on with not anymore, but what's going on with North Korea? What about China? What about all these website internet hacks going on? This cyber threats that are happening. I mean, there's a lot of stuff for the government to worry about. Right. Terrorists. So worrying about a small UFO group and collection of data really isn't probably at the top of their list of things to worry about. Honestly. And in fact, it appears that many of them are watching it just like you can on UFOstalker.com or on our MUFON.com website. You can watch the reports as they come in across the board. We have a lot of people who do that. I mean, Alejandro does that, and he reports on it through his channel.
Oh, how about that?
Right?
Maybe I'll start doing that.
Yeah, you should do that too.
Yeah. So when someone is reporting, can you just kind of explain? There is, the trust is built through anonymity, and
sure.
Can you explain how that is held? I mean, talk about that could be hacked, of course, but it would have to be really something, really something special for someone to want to go through the trouble of hacking it. But
right.
Can you tell about that element?
Yeah. So what happens? And we're about to roll out a new front end to CMS that'll be mobile friendly and tablet friendly as well. But when you report a sighting to MUFON, you go to our website, mufon.com, you click on Report a UFO, and you fill out that form. When you push that submit button, it is automatically sent to the state or national director where your sighting occurred. So if you were vacationing in France and you saw something on the Eiffel Tower and you put in a report, it would go to the national director for France, or it would go to the national director for Des Moines, Iowa, or Iowa, whatever, wherever it happened. And then they assign a field investigator to look into the case and review the case and decide whether it needs to be investigated or not, talk to the witness, et cetera, and come up with a final disposition on the case. So it's all automated. Everything happens. Now, we did put a filter in it to catch foul words because we have people who seem to like toilet jokes. And rather than publishing those to the public, we strip those out, and then they get reviewed by a small team of people called CMS administrators who then basically remove the foul words. If it's strictly nothing but we do get not a lot of these, but we get a fair amount of these where people are just writing junk. Yeah. They get quote deleted out of the database. Basically, they just get removed from the view. Nothing ever gets deleted out of the database, but they get removed from the public view and they get marked as a hoax, and then we move on. But 99.9% of the cases come through are clean. People are reporting exactly what they've seen, and those go right. They don't go through any filtering process. They go right to the state director and get assigned. So now the other thing that happens is that the data that you put in for your personal information is actually separated out into a separate database from the actual report, and those two are attached, but they're not in the same database. So if anyone ever wanted to hack the sighting database, they would not necessarily get they should not get your personal information.
Okay.
And we actually,
go
ahead. We actually asked people, would you like to remain anonymous? Okay. And most majority of people, they don't really care. But we never go public with someone's name unless we go back to them and say, hey, we've got a call from Martin Willis and he heard your case and he wants to put you on his show. Is that something you'd be interested in? And they could say yes or no. And if they say no, it's over with, done with. We'll let you know they're not going to come on. If they say yes, then we put them in touch with you and you would talk to them. So we do get, that's very rare, but we do get those.
How about the other way around? Someone wanted to remain anonymous, and then all of a sudden another witness comes forward and they want to connect. Do you ever do any like behind the scenes connecting of people that had the same sighting?
Well, we get requests like that occasionally, and what we do is we reach out to the other party and we say, hey, look, we have a request from this individual who'd like to talk to you about your sighting report because they have a similar one, and we leave it up to them. So we always leave it up to the witness. If they want to, some want to communicate, others just want to forget about it. It happened, I'm done with it, I don't want to talk to anybody more about it. So the answer is yes, we have, but we're very cautious in how we do it.
We got 1 minute left, to talk about. Can you, in 1 minute, are you able to tell us like a real interesting case, a recent case, anything you can talk about?
Well, gosh, there's so many cases. I always tell people we get 500 to 1,000 a month, so there's just so many great cases. I guess one of my favorite cases was an airline pilot back in 94, I think it was, where a TWA pilot was flying from Missouri out to St. Louis, out to San Francisco, and the plane was delayed. It didn't get off the ground until after midnight, so it was like 2, 3 in the morning by the time he got out to I think 2 in the morning by the time he got out to the West Coast, towards the West Coast, and it was pitch black on the ground. And all of a sudden, he and his co-pilot looked out and he saw this ILS wink up on the bottom of the black floor down below. It was pink, I think, and purple, and it was three-dimensional ILS, which is an instrument landing system. And they looked up in the front of their windshield of their airliner, and they could see these little like fireflies flitting around looked like up at space. The next thing they saw was these things going choo-choo just down the chute, like one after the other, boom, 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 following down the ILS and landing. And then as soon as they all got down, it went out, and it went completely black again. And he said, Jan, when that happened, we were over Area 51.
Oh.
And I always remember that. I always remember that.
Isn't that protected airspace, though? Isn't that protected airspace?
Well, but if you're at 37,000 feet or whatever, and you're flying west, and you're outside that, you can still see these things coming down. I mean, you've got a pretty good range.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
20, 30, yeah.
So we can see it at an angle. Well, hey, Jan, thanks so much. And so throw out your email one more time. Not that you don't get enough emails, so you got to get more. So, yeah.
Yeah, people are always welcome to write me at exe.executive.dir@mufon.com, exe.dir@mufon.com, or you can just go to info@mufon.com and it'll get to me.
Excellent. All right, Jan, thanks so much. It's been a real pleasure as always. Always fun to talk to you.
Thank you, Martin.
Take
care.
Take care.
Bye-bye.
Yeah, bye. All right, everyone. So remember next week, if you're on YouTube, we are not going to be live. But the show will come up on YouTube. It's going to be regular time on KGRA radio. That will be on, but it'll be a pre-recorded show. That's all. And then the following week, basically the same thing on KGRA radio. On with Grant Cameron. It's going to be during the day. I don't have that time set up yet. Thanks so much, everyone. This has been a lot of fun tonight, and we'll see you next week. And remember to keep your eyes to the sky.
And we're clear. Martin, great program.
All right. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much. And I guess you're going to be off?
Yeah, I'll be sending you up. I already sent some clips to you. Thanks a lot, Grace.
Right. Thank you very much. And you have a wonderful vacation.
All right. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.